Welcome everyone. Yesterday we had our first training on how to develop apps, and we had an introduction to Flutter, and of course you must have had something to do with that. Okay, and I want to make a recap of the session that we had yesterday. But this time with the lenses of a manager. Okay. The lenses of a manager are not the same lenses as a technical person who is involved in developing this app. Why do I want to emphasize this? When you are in an organization and you are the manager, decisions have to be made. Most times these decisions have to be made by you. That means that you sometimes have to make decisions even in a field that is not yours. Okay? You could be a health manager and you want to develop an app as an organization, and you have a software engineer on one side and you on the other side, and the decision has to be made. So the engineer will ask you questions on what you want. So that means that you really need to know the language, the language used in app development, or the language used in IT in general. And that is basically the reason as to why the same manager should know at least something on everything. Okay, that's why that language is used, or that phrase is used. So I'm going to take you through the journey for Risto. Okay, and through that journey, you will be able to pick the managerial aspects associated with such a role. So what do we really have? So I'll be writing here to take you through that journey. What do we have? We have a situation where Risto decided to provide premium content for secondary school students. Secondary school students. That was what we aimed to achieve. Okay, to make sure that students get our well-drafted content. And this content is provided in the form of slides, question banks, quizzes, and videos. Okay, including assignments, like multiple choice questions, open questions, or what you can call open book exams or questions, and a number of things, forum discussions, a lot. Okay, so that is the content we developing, or that is the content we want these students to access. So this content can be accessed via different platforms. So of course, you can decide, if you are to take up this project, you can decide to just make this content and share it on social media. Okay, just what is happening here. Okay, so you can decide to say, this content I'm going to make it and share it on social media. You can decide to say, let me just make this content and put it on our website. Let's see the second option. The third option is that you can decide, okay, let's just put this content on YouTube That is the videos. Just put them on YouTube. And then fourth option is that you can say, let's put this content on an app. Okay? But for you to make that decision where you want to put this content, there are considerations. Okay? The consideration is the format of the content, because for example on YouTube you cannot put slides, it has to be a video. Okay, so the format of the content, are they notes, are they web pages, are they slides? So you have to answer that. The other thing is, how do you make sure that people can pay for that content? If you put it on YouTube, maybe no student will be able to pay, because this content is basically free on the YouTube. You just have to buy data and then access it. So you have to think about monetizing that content. How do you make sure that you monetize it? Because at the end of the day, you need resources, because developing this content basically requires resources. Okay, so you have to think about monetizing. But for us, our main issue was that we are targeting what the category of students that we call the Gen Z. Okay, these are unique students. When we talk about Gen Z, these are usually people born after 1995. So this category of students, they have their own characteristics. Okay, they are young, they are energetic, they are tech savvy. Tech savvy. When you hear the word tech savvy, it is to say that someone is good at navigating the different technologies that we have. That is what we call a tech savvy. So they are tech savvies. They know stylish things. They have style. They have that elegance in them. So that means that if you're going to develop an app, it has to exude that excellency, that elegance, that edge, that .com edge. Okay, if I can call it .com edge. So that is where the app now takes it up. Once we think that with the app, we are able to control the messaging. We are in charge of everything, compared to if, for example, we put this content on YouTube. Okay, so with the app, we are in charge. So when we are in charge, it means that our branding, our positioning, we are very much in charge of everything. So that is where the app now becomes our focus. Okay, but that doesn't mean that we shall not be using, or you cannot be using your app together with, for example, having a website, having social media platforms, or even having a YouTube channel. You actually need them, but it depends on where you want to put your focus. Now, having made a decision that you need an app, it means before you contact someone who will do the app, as a manager, there are questions that you need to answer. Okay, so what questions do you need to answer? What type of app do you want? What functionalities do you want the app to have? What are the issues that you need to have in terms of branding in the app? So you have a lot of questions that you need to answer. Do you want the app on Android phones? Do you want the app on iPhones? Do you want the app to run on desktops? So you need to make a decision on that. Therefore, that is where basically you need to have the language. You need to understand the language used in developing apps, because that is the language you will use when you're talking to the software engineer, the one who is going to develop the app for you. Okay? Excuse me. So that becomes very, very pertinent. So that means that you will not contact the engineer without having some basics. Okay? Because one of the things that the engineer will ask you is what you can term as terms of reference. Terms of reference. Okay? Terms of reference. That is what you will be asked. So with the terms of reference, it's basically the document that outlines in details the things that you want the engineer to do for you in developing this app. So there is no way you can develop this document without you understanding the language of developing apps. So that is why it becomes very, very key. Okay? So the first thing, therefore, that comes to mind in developing the terms of reference is to basically know what your app is able to do. What should your app be able to do? For our case, the decisions rotate around that app should be opened on different devices. Okay, whether that device is an Android phone. Most people have Android phones. Other people have iPhones. Other people have laptops, and these laptops run on what we call operating systems that we call Windows. And then we have other laptops that run on operating system that we call Mac OS. These are basically the MacBooks, or those computers made by Apple. And then we have Linux, which is an open source, operating system. So what does this really mean? And then iPhones, of course, run on what we call iOS, the system that powers the iPhones is what we call iOS. And then for Android, we basically say Android operating systems. So when we talk about operating systems, we are basically talking about the engine that powers these devices, if I'm to use just a simple language. Okay, all the way a computer works depends on what system it has, what system powers it. Okay, so it can be Windows, and then we have the different versions of Windows. Okay, Windows 10, Windows 11, and I think the latest ones are Windows 11, maybe Windows 12 is about to be released, I'm not very sure. Okay, so those are the different versions of Windows operating systems. Okay, so all these other systems also have different versions. They keep upgrading from one version to the other. Okay, so for us, our interest is that the students should be able to access our app on the different devices, even on what we call the web. Okay, so that means that we need to make a decision, which that decision I can call it an operational decision. Operational decision that has an element to do with the financial implication. If you look at the history of how apps have been developed, been developed over the years, you realize that previously, what you will do as a manager, you will hire people to develop this app. So you will hire one engineer, software engineer, to develop the Android app. You get another engineer who will develop the iOS app. Okay? And then maybe another one for the desktop version of the same app. So usually you basically require teams to work together, and these may not be within the same organization. So the organizations can actually be different. Okay, so it is possible to have several organizations teaming up to develop for you the app, and each organization will have its own terms and conditions. That is basically financial, what you need to pay. So that means that you need to have several budgets. Or alternatively, if you don't have enough money, you need to say, okay, let's first develop the Android app. So when you develop the Android app, people who have iPhones will not be able to access that. And for example, one of the companies here for mobile money started with the Android application. Recently, perhaps they started they now have the iOS. I'm not very sure, but that is a decision that you have to make because it has financial implication. Okay, and it also has a message that it carries to your customers. If you go with one device, it means that you're not stable enough to go for two. That means financially you are not in a stable situation. So it has a branding message it carries when you make a decision like that. So over the years, now engineers can develop, you can develop an app that can go on Android, iOS, and then also web versions of the app. So this was a major breakthrough. Okay, so that means when you have this situation, you don't need to have several groups of software engineers working on the same project, maybe from different organizations and from different geographical areas. So you can have one person developing an app that will work here, work there, and work here as a web version, what we call the web apps. So that is something that changed dramatically. The way apps are being adopted. That means that actually meant that small organizations in IT, usually we can call them startups. Tech startups utilize this ability to cross-develop. Okay, the terminology used here, the ability to design an app that works on different devices, is what we call cross development of apps. Cross development of apps. Okay, that is cross development of apps. That means that you use what we call the IT people call it, we use one code base, what they usually call the single code base. So they write a code, the one code that they can compile, and be able to work on Androids and then iOS devices, and then also we have a web app. Okay, so single code base that is compiled to work on different devices. So the other one here that we are having is compiling. Compiling is basically saying that, okay, a code is written. The code to me is an instruction or instructions to perform a particular task. So basically, the app is made up of a code. Okay? So the app has several instructions, and then those instructions are the ones that make the app to do what you want it to do. And usually the word is execute. Okay? So what is this compiling? When the code is written, it has to be understood by the machine. Now this is where humans are different from computers in relation to how we can read information. Okay, so we know, for example, plain languages, plain text and numbers. We can read and understand what this text means and things like that. But there's also text that we, as humans, cannot understand, but the computers do understand. So when you write the code, that code has to be translated into a language that the computer understands. And that is basically the compiling that we So we have softwares that do this work, which we call the compilers. So this basically is basically for the machine to understand, which is basically a computer to understand. And if the computer understands what you have written, which is the code, then it will execute. It will understand. If you speak to somebody in a language that they will not understand, they don't understand, they will not act. It's the same thing with computers. If you write a code that the computers don't understand, they will not execute the instructions as you instructed them to do. Okay, so how did the solution of cross development of apps arise? Of course, different softwares can now be used, were actually developed to be able to do what you call cross development of apps. And that is where now Flutter comes in. That is now where Flutter comes in. So Flutter is just one of the other several frameworks that can be used to develop apps that can go to iOS, Android, and also web versions. Okay, so this word here, framework, for you who are in health, just take it like it is a skeleton. For you who are engineers, just take it like it is foundation for which you build something. Okay? Now, what does this Flutter contain? So basically, just think about the Flutter as the framework onto which you build apps, just like what I've said in terms of skeleton or in terms of foundation. But when basically, when you're going to build something, whether it is a house, whether it is a what, there are certain things that need to be there. Of course, these are materials and machines. Materials and machines. You will not do things manually. You need to mix the sand together with the cement, and then if you're going to make aggregate, you still need to have stones. So you need machines. You need the spade. Or you need other mixers, heavy mixers. So it's the Flutter is just like that. for you to be able to develop an app, you need to have several things that should be there for you to develop the app. And some of those things, one is the libraries. Okay, one of those things are the libraries. So within the libraries, just like the way the word sounds, you have, when you have the library, you have different books about different sections. So if you want to read the economics, just go to the economics section, pick the book and read. If you want to go to political science, you go there and pick. It's the same thing with libraries in Flutter. You basically, it's basically a collection of codes that you can use for developing the app that you want. You reuse, okay, or reusable code. Okay, so you need to have the library there. What Flutter is that it is actually beyond just a framework. It provides what we call SDK. SDK. So if you hear about this, very frequent in the IT language, this basically means software development kit. Software development kit. This that you are basically, if you're going to develop an app, you're going to develop it within the software. So within that software, you have different things that you need, and some of those things are the ones that call the libraries. Okay, you have libraries. These are sample codes that you will use in developing the app. But you also have other things that you also can always use. For example, when you're using Flutter, you will encounter the word widgets a lot. These are basically the foundational, you can call them the building blocks for one app when you're using Flutter. Okay, you have the widgets are pre-made, preset or pre-made, whatever you can call, but let me call them pre-made codes that you can use for whatever purpose. It's just like saying that when you're going to build a house, you don't necessarily need to start making the bricks on site. You may just need to use bricks that have been made from by another person or another company. Then you bring and put them onto your house. Okay, so widgets or widgets, for wherever you can pronounce them, are the blocks that you can use in building the app. So these can be customized according to what you want. It's just like saying, I will bring bricks and put them the way you want them. Okay, so you can decide that I need bricks which are bigger, or I need bricks that are smaller, and then you go and buy those that you think you want. And developing an app using Flutter is a little bit easier because you have widgets that have been made by other people that you can use at no cost. That brings us to the concept of what we call open source. Okay, open source. Open source means that this is a software that is freely available for anyone to use, and sometimes the code for that software is also available for anyone to use. This is to say that someone can modify the code and go another, can be another application. Okay, and this carries a lot of advantages. One is what we talked about in terms of communities. You have open source softwares tend to have large communities. When we talk about community, we are basically referring to the fact that we have different groups of people who are using the app, and they share knowledge about that app. So that means that if you get any problem with that application or that software, you can always check these communities. And where do we find these communities? These communities are on social media. Okay, you have groups of people who are on, for example, X, who are using Flutter. We have groups of people who are using who are using Flutter on Facebook. And then we have people who have very good channels who want to develop Flutter on YouTube. We also have WhatsApp groups, a lot of groups. So those are what we call communities. The importance of communities is that they share knowledge. Okay? What does this really mean? That, okay, now if you're using an app or software, it is likely that sometimes you get problems. Okay? You get problems and you don't know how to solve those problems. So you may need to go to these communities and see how they have dealt with this problem. That's why communities are very important, and that also relates very much to how old a software has been in existence. So for example, for Flutter, we are talking about 2017, around there. That is when it actually went open, but of course the development and things like that happened earlier on. And then the adoption of Flutter by Google also became very, very important around that time. So what does this really mean? The implication, for example, if you're a manager, one of the key things is to see who owns the company. And actually, with the software programs, for example, in a managerial position, you need to look at sustainability. So sustainability is very important, especially in developing these apps. You don't want to work with an organization whose sustainability you don't understand. Okay, it's, for example, getting a company that has not been tested for years to do work for you. Let us say hosting, let us say web development or things like that. You have a lot of challenges if that company closes. But now when you have a company like Google saying that Flutter and that are their products, then for you as a manager, in terms of sustainability, it is very easy to make that decision, because you know that Google is not going to go anywhere. It is one of the most valuable companies around the world. Okay, so that stamps it. It stamps. It makes like, okay, you don't have any worries whether the company will continue to exist or not. Why are we interested in that? You will have these softwares can have errors, what we call bugs. Okay, bugs. So if you don't have an active company, people will identify these bugs, which we are saying are errors, but since this company is no longer there, it means debugging will not, the removal of those bugs will not happen. So that is your worry. So you'll have a software and the new versions are not coming up. The new versions come with the new updates, but also with fixing existing errors. So that's why having an active organization is very important. So when you're making that decision, take that into consideration. Okay, so you need to have a company that you know that will continue to exist, and that if you have errors, they can easily be fixed. Sometimes organizations rest the application. They say, no, we are no longer going to push this, and actually the time they pull it down. And one example is, I think, Internet Explorer, which is a browser. It used to be the important browser. Okay, I remember in those years, uh, it was the go-to browser. Easy, Google Chrome, I think, has taken over. It is the leading browser, I think. But there was time when Internet Explorer was the main thing, and then Mozilla Firefox was also the main thing. So this is basically to give you an example that softwares can be rested, and when they are rested, no improvements are going to be pushed, no new versions are going to come, and people will definitely abandon it. And when they abandon it, they move to another software, and then the company says, "Oh, no, we are going to remove this completely so that no one uses it." And this is what happened with Internet Explorer. So that sustainability issue is very important. When you have a very valuable company working on particular software, that's a plus. But also that is not to mean that always products from big companies are always the ones that will work. Sometimes you have small startups that make excellent products, and if you are not aware, and you rush always for these big companies that provide these software. So this is basically to give you an insight on the decision-making processes in buying a particular software. Okay, you may decide to go for open source, which is freely available for use, or you can decide to go for a commercial version of the platform or the program or software. But if you go for the commercial version, you also need to consider the cost, the issues to do with support, the issues to do with sustainability. Okay, and the need for having a larger community, just like what I have explained. Okay, so what's the other thing that you need to know? Open source, different versions. Flutter is new. Yes, so then that is where we have that coming in. Just and a simple introduction is that is the language that powers Flutter. Basically, when you use Flutter as a framework, you're going to use that as the programming language. So IT people have different languages. They can be called computer languages, can be called programming languages. There are several of them. For you as a manager, you may not really need to go and learn each and every language for you to make a decision. I don't think that is necessary. What is very important, if you have chosen the framework, you have said, okay, I'm going with Flutter because of the reasons that we have outlined. What language powers Flutter is that. That means it is actually a straightforward decision. That is the language that is used in Flutter. So that means that it is not very complicated to make such a decision. So still, the relationship between that and it is, you can't do Flutter apps without using that language. One of the things that you can do with that is that as a programming language, by the understanding what this language is, what is a language, these codes are written in different languages. Remember, these codes are the instructions that make the app to behave in a particular way, or to execute particular tasks, or to do particular tasks. Okay, so we are saying we have several languages: Python, you can have C++, you can have JavaScript, and many other languages. Okay, so the decision for us to go with this because it works with Flutter. But just know that these different languages are having different functionalities. This is to say that they don't all work the same way. Okay, they don't all work the same way. Some of these languages are better at doing particular tasks. Some of them are very good at, for example, Swift is for developing apps for iOS. Objective-C is also very good for iOS. and then also Python, JavaScript, they can also do different roles. So do you need to learn them? Like I said, no. But if you want to make money from this computer software development or app development, you may need to learn several of them, and you need to keep up with the trends. Okay, you need to keep up with the trends. There are some languages that perhaps are not as slick as some of the latest. Okay, but you also can have some languages that have been doing extremely very well for over several years. So that means that you need to understand the dynamics and then also your background. For example, people who know how to write JavaScript can easily write that language. Okay, and also there's also another aspect that if you can write a code in that language, but you can also write it, transfer that code to be written in another language, for example, JavaScript. And like it was said, that people who made Flutter or that language actually have origins they started with Java, okay? So that also is to say that these things are similar. They are not very complicated. If you know one language, it is easy to know the other. If you know Arabic, Juba, it is easy to know the pure Arabic. If you know pure Arabic, it is easy for you to know Arabic, Juba. Basically, that is that. Of course, learning new things is very simple. Like I said, using AI can be a very good tool for you to understand some of these things. So if you read something and you don't understand it, you can just take it to AI and say, please explain for me what this means in a language for a 5-year-old. And then they will explain that to you and you'll be able to know. And when you go for a meeting discussing with your software engineer, you actually know what they are talking about, such that you're not very good. Okay? So let's now go to creating that environment where you're now going to develop the application. You're going to develop that application on your computer. And the usual computers can really do this one. You don't need a high performance computer to be able to develop these apps. When we talk about high performance, we talk about the processor, talk about issues to do with the RAM and things like that. Basic computers, or computers for students, if I can use that. 4 GB RAM, i5 or i3, yeah, you should be able to do some work. Okay, though having a high performing computer may be something that you may want. Okay, something that you may want. So on your computer, you need to install softwares that you will use for developing this. Okay, so of course you already talked about Flutter. You already talked about that. But you also need other things. For example, here I noted you need to have Git. You need to have Git. You need to have VC Code, and then you need to have Android command line tools. Android command line tools. Those are the things that you basically need. Okay, so these ones you already know. Git is version control. This is to say that if you make changes to your code, you may need to retrieve the changes that you made so that you can adjust them again. Okay, and then the Android command tools. You're using a laptop to develop this code, but this code will work, for example, on Android. So you need to have commands that can allow communication between the laptop and the Android device. And then VC code. VC code is the code editor that you need. The changes that you have to make in the code such that the code can be able to execute particular functions. Okay, this is basically related to what is called the Android Studio. Okay, you write your code in the Android Studio or in the VS Code. So you make the changes in this, either this, or you decide to install one of them, and when you make those changes, they will make the app to be in a particular way. One of the things of using Flutter, one of the things that come with using Flutter is what we call auto reload, which is that when you have your code here, when you make changes to that code, that those changes can be reflected here on your device. So this is basically to say that when you're developing the app, you can have what you call a virtual machine. So you have a virtual Android device here, smartphone and Android smartphone here. So you write the code, you say you want a button, and then the button will appear. Then you say, okay, the button should be red, and then you put the instructions there. This one will change to red. The ability of using the things directly on this virtual machine is what we call auto reload in Flutter. Okay, you can also, you may not have the virtual machine, but you can have the app that you're developing on your phone, on your Android phone, the physical one, and you'll still be able to see your changes there. Okay, so that is basically what we learned about yesterday, and incorporating the managerial decisions that you have to incorporate in reaching where we have reached as an institution in developing this app. I hope this helps in clarifying some of the things that perhaps you may not have understood, so that we can be on the same page. Thank you.